Does Lori have a key to get in here? If she...
The doors. I left the door.
Oh, you left the door unlocked? Okay.
It's propped open.
Gotcha. I came in the other.
Oh.
And I think it was actually unlocked.
Oh. Jay's taking on new duties, and one of those is to make sure the building's locked. He's emptying trash
It might not
cans.
have been. The key I have, it's like...
He's not as well trained as the other guy was.
Nate and the
Danny.
Rob, how's school going?
School? What school?
Homeschool.
Actually, it's going pretty well. This is one of those things I've seen a couple of people post. It's like, so almost every kid's going to want homeschool after this.
Yeah.
Because they're realizing that the actual amount of work is only about 3 to 3.5 hours of actual study and work time.
Yeah.
You've got that much?
Well,
I'm in the hour to hour and a half.
I'm being generous.
Yeah. I'm being generous too.
I'm going by what a lot of the homeschool people actually have to do, being the full 3 to 4. But I mean, even then, they're going 3 to 4. That means I'm wasting how much time being at school?
What's your son's experience?
Huh?
What are you guys experiencing though? They're like, my kid doesn't have an hour and a half worth of work to do today.
No, they're done
About
by
an hour.
They're done by 10:30.
My kid is out of bed by 10.
Well, my kids are. We make our kids get up at 8 o'clock every morning, or at least wake them up, where it's like you are not treating this that way.
Yeah.
And then they typically get up, grab some breakfast, and then they get their homework done, and they're done by 11. My senior, he was struggling a little bit in calc, so he's having to do some makeup, so he's spending a full morning on that's AP calc. So it's calc VC, so he's having to do a little bit there, but that's about all.
We compromised on getting up at 9.
Yeah, we said 8.
And 9's been a challenge.
The one I didn't win was up and actually dressed.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, I gave up on shower before noon.
They're still in dumps at that point.
I mean, he's up. He's doing his homework.
So, right. So.
It's been frustrating. But we'll all get through it.
We will.
Yeah, and I do a lot from home. I have to go into the church some, but not. I was in more this week, just getting all of our retiring equipment, collecting it, getting it wiped and cleaned, and off to donation so that it can go to families in the Kansas City, Kansas area and stuff to be used for schooling and that. So I ship out.
You need a monitor?
6 Android tablets, 10 iPad 2s.
Oh, wow.
5 MacBook Air, 2015 MacBook Airs, and 4 Windows tablets. So,
Wow.
yeah, so I was in and had my part-time contract guy in getting that done so that they can be out in a timely manner. I'm selling this staff. It's like right now with what's going on.
She is at home. She's on a precautionary 14-day quarantine from work. She attended a funeral 2 weeks ago, so thought just to be safe.
So my employee found out that
Out of state.
one of our clients, he was there on site. And they were pretty much on, but they're moving, so he was there, and there were like 20 construction workers there. Apparently, one of the wives of one of the construction workers tested positive for COVID.
Yeah.
And that, okay, you're second tier away.
Yep.
You really didn't have contact, but now having some
Yeah.
precautions around.
We had a street department employee, a water department employee, spent a couple hours, maybe 3 or 4 hours with a friend of his girlfriend's who had tested positive. So he's off as well.
That's where it's kind of
Just have to do it.
Were you near the person whose wife, or was he in a whole different floor?
Yeah. I see the county's doing that testing program, and they tested the first round of 390 or so, and I think about 4% came back positive. Now I don't know if they vetted that 390 for people who had been exposed potentially or had symptoms or something. I don't know if that's just a random sample.
I suspect there was some betting.
But if it's a random sample, that's really high.
They said it was purely random off of
Really,
email
4%
addresses somehow.
seems really high to me.
Well,
I was like,
so
man,
if you
test me.
responded to the county survey, then you were in the pool to be. They had like 50,000
Oh, is that how you got
responses.
in
I
the
think
pool?
so.
Okay,
Yeah.
So if you responded to that survey,
Yeah.
just any response.
I believe so. Right. That was the pool they picked to, and then they, whatever the survey people do to norm or make that
Yeah.
correct.
Representative of the
Exactly.
population or whatever.
Yeah, they picked them. All right, I got 7:00.
Good.
7:00. We will call the April 16th DeSoto City Council meeting to order. Roll call, please. All right.
Lane.
Here.
Daniels.
Here.
Hanemichael.
Here.
Ritter absent.
I'm here.
Oh, sorry, Kevin. And Murdoch.
Here.
All right.
Okay. We will rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Our first two items tonight are proclamations. We have a proclamation for April as Fair Housing Month and proclaiming April 24th, 2020 as Arbor Day. I will read the proclamations. This is for Fair Housing Month. Whereas the Congress of the United States passed the Civil Rights Act of 1968, of which Title 8 declared the law of the land would now guarantee the rights of equal housing opportunity. And whereas the city of DeSoto is committed to the mission and intent of Congress to provide fair and equal housing opportunities for all, and whereas the fair housing groups and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development have, over the years, received thousands of complaints of alleged illegal housing discrimination and found too many which have proved upon investigation to be violations of the fair housing laws. And whereas equal housing opportunity is a condition of life in DeSoto, Kansas, which can and should be achieved, now therefore I, Rick Walker, Mayor of the City of DeSoto, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2020 as Fair Housing Month and express the hope this year's observance will promote fair housing practices throughout the city of DeSoto, Kansas. Arbor Day. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for planting of trees, and whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas 2020 is the 148th anniversary of the holiday, and Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees are a renewable resource giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and beautification for our communities, and whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy, beauty, and spiritual renewal, now, therefore, I, Rick Walker, Mayor of DeSoto, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 24th, 2020, as Arbor Day in the city of DeSoto, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support the efforts to protect our trees, woodlands, and further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. Okay. Next item is our consent agenda. We have the minutes from our council meeting of April 2nd, 2020, and pay ordinance 876. Any comments or discussion about the consent agenda or a motion?
I'll make a motion we approve the consent agenda.
I will second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Lane,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Hanamaker.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. Our next item is normally called to public, but because members of the public cannot attend the electronic meeting, we will suspend this part of our meeting. Mike, did we get any email correspondence from anybody?
No, we didn't have anybody asking to
Okay.
be entered into the record.
Item 3 is old business, which we have none. So we'll go to 4, new business. Approved site plan submitted by K10 Place 2 LLC for Phase 2 of apartments.
Council, I prepared just a brief memo to you. This is somewhat of a formality as part of the pilot agreement for phase 2 of the apartments. It calls for not only the planning commission, but also the city council to approve their site plan. I know Brad has reviewed the site plan, and the planning commission did recommend approval. So staff's recommendation is that you approve the site plan on the same terms as the planning commission did, which includes a couple conditions.
Okay. Questions from council?
Resolution number?
1029.
Make a motion, we approve resolution 1029 as written.
I will second.
Second it.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the motion? Roll call, please.
Hanamichael,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
and Mayor, since that is.
That's why it is a quasi zoning or yes.
Yeah.
I was curious. I was like, all right, because it was a condition of the. I didn't know if it would necessarily apply. So next item B, approve ordinance rezoning property at 34000 West 91st Terrace.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. What you have before you is the rezoning, even though we've already approved the site plan for the location. Actually, it's submitted by Travis Hicks, the owner of Hike 10, and this is phase 2 of the apartment complex. He's just simply asking for a change from C2 to R3. Certainly can't do housing in the C2 district. We did send out notification letters. The public hearing was posted, did all our functionary duties. I did not hear any comments from any of the residents nearby. And no one attended the planning commission on this item. Granted, it was our first electronic planning commission meeting. I think the first one the city held under this, under the new separation standards that we're dealing with now. So anyway, just going through some of the items, I wanted to point out that the tract is a little bit of an odd shape. The detention pond piece is not being rezoned. It's remaining at C2. So that's why there's that cul-de-sac and then a little sort of piece that comes out of the end of the cul-de-sac bowl that's remaining C2, even though it is a detention pond. And that was included in the site plan. And it is a detention pond for the entire development, at least on the north side of Commerce Drive. Just going through the outline, the character is going to be as indicated in the site plan. The buildings will be very similar in color, nature, materials, etc., as what's to the north. Staff felt that the location and the proximity to the existing apartment complex was certainly suitable for this zoning change. Also, the clubhouse, pool, and some of those amenities that were included in the phase 1 will be also accessible by the residents for phase 2. As far as compatibility of the zoning, this area is in a little bit of a transition, obviously. Not too long ago, less than a year ago, we rezoned the whole thing to C2 from M1, and now we're changing it to, from M1 to C2, now we're adding an R3. There is still quite a bit of industrial in the area. There's certainly retail and commercial development, and even a little bit of residential that adjoins this site. However, on their commercial or on the community development plan, we do show this area as mixed use, so I think that fits certainly well within the discussion that we're having tonight on the proposed rezoning. Suitability for the uses which the properties have been restricted under existing zoning. C2 is a highly desirable district. However, we don't allow housing in the C2 district, so with this proposal would require rezoning to R3. And as I just said, I think it fits within our plan for our future land use. You talk about it is a vacant site, and it was vacant primarily under the M1 district. As a C2, it hasn't really had a chance to develop. However, certainly the owner feels like that it's an opportunity to add more residents, which also will help feed the potential retail growth if we can ever get out of the doldrums of the COVID-19 virus. But anyway, there's a lot of development still proceeding. When I talk to people in the construction industry, they seem to be going full steam ahead. So nobody seems to be finding too much of an inconvenience at this point in time. Utilities are all there. The infrastructure's been recently put in. The curbs and streets have recently been through the inspection process, and those are all in place. Fire, parks, schools will see little change from previous conditions. We did have some discussion on parking with the site plan. They do meet the code to the T. Not one space more, not one space less. It's exactly what is required. However, it does meet the code, so it passes that test. As far as environmental concerns, don't see any change or increase or decrease in any kind of environmental harm. As I mentioned, the detention pond for the development is in the adjacent to the area. It does provide a little bit of open space. I think one thing also that I like that on the site plan, I mentioned at the Planning Commission meeting, there's a big thicket of natural native trees that are going to remain at that sidewalk that goes from Commerce up to the development. Kind of will go through, but so it's kind of a nice benefit to keep those trees that the developer on their own agreed to do or continued that. Decided not to bulldoze them. How's that? Anyway, going through the rest of the standards that we go through, find everything positive. Planning Commission, as you can see in the minutes, did ask several questions of the developer, and the developer, Travis and Justin Milburn, were both did participate via the go-to-meeting procedures that we developed. And it was a recommendation of our staff that we approve this, and the Planning Commission is recommending approval. With that, I will stand for any questions that you all may have.
Questions from council? Did the applicant want to, since I see they're on the call, I don't know if they'd want to address the council at all, Travis, or?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. I don't have any further comment, but I would certainly be open for any questions that you may have.
Okay. Questions? Again, back to questions or a motion, I guess.
I'll make a motion to rezone a tract of land at 34000 West 91st Terrace from C2 Business General to R2 Residential Multifamily as recommended by the Planning Commission.
I'll second the
I'll
motion.
second.
There's probably an ordinance number that
It
goes
is.
with that.
Was this
2290.
2290?
Ready for roll call?
Yeah, if there's no further discussion of the motion, roll call, please.
Lane,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Hanamichael,
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. We'll move on. Item C, consider contract with BHC Roads for sign visualization modeling along K10.
Since this is involves the company that I'm the president of, I will recuse myself from this item.
All right.
You can notify me when I can return.
All right. Sure will.
I'll note that for the minutes.
Okay. So following our meeting when we discussed pole signs, I was talking to Kevin about pole signs, and through the discussion, discovered that his company does visualizations for pole signs to let governing bodies or deciding parties understand what the implications, how it will look, how the corridor will look, in, with the addition of a pole sign. So I suggested that Kevin should put together a proposal to bring back to the city so that we could look at we have a number of potential pole sign sites, and to provide us a visualization so that we could better understand what that corridor would look like with pole signs on the various tracks that might be requesting one in the future. I thought this information would be helpful for the council as a governing body and the planning commission as they're considering those special use permits. So BHC brought back a proposal. It was less than Mike's ability to approve, but because it involved city councilman and because Mike's brothers are also have ownership in that company, I wanted to bring it to the full council to get your feedback and approval for if we want to go forward with this. So, questions about what we're doing here?
I don't really have any questions, but I think when we were doing the last poll sign, it was kind of a thought of mine too, to be able to have something like this to visualize what's going on. So, I'm in favor of doing something like this. I think it would be very useful in the future.
Did you, is that link active that you're
I think it is. Yeah.
trying to click
Let's see.
this? Because I know it's not in the packet, but just kind of what the product then I think would be.
This one, it's not for signs, but it's for this Taco Bell.
Visibility analysis for a
Yeah.
Taco Bell site somewhere, but that's. I think Kevin had provided a still of it might have even been the Burger King site, but it was just.
So will this come back with like sightline distances and stuff? Or is it just visualization of?
It's visualization. I don't know that it would say this is the view from 4,700 feet away to this site. I think it would be more like a fly through, similar to that video.
Mayor, I did notice Mark Sherfy is with BHC. He's on the
great.
He's on the video conference.
There we
Maybe he
go.
can answer a question.
Well,
And
Mark, did you hear the question?
I'm not certain I heard the question. Are you all hearing me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Okay.
will this cover any of the sightline distances? How far will the visibility go, specifically coming east on K10 from Lawrence? And
Yes.
so,
Yeah,
because
we
there's a couple
do,
hills there. So how
a
far
couple
out?
different videos. The intent would be to show an angle from east and westbound K10, from east and westbound Commerce Drive, and from east and west 91st Street, kind of at a driver eye height, 3.5 feet above the pavement. So you'd be able to kind of see how things are going to look in your movie files if you were driving along those. We would plan on having the McDonald's sign being built in the model correctly, and to the best of our ability, the Burger King and a Super 8. And then for the remaining red dots in the exhibit, we would just kind of put up the 60-foot pole with your maximum size from your ordinance. So it's kind of a placeholder for where future signs would be. Should be able to give you a really good perspective of how this all might look in the future, or how you determine you want to phase it. The Taco Bell model that you just showed was trying to address a different problem. If they built one at that location, would it be viewable from the road? So that was a pretty quick and easy way, but a good way to kind of show you what our capabilities might be. We would show the signs, and then any of your buildings there, we would at least kind of get a rectangle to the height of that building. So as far as sight lines go, you'd know where your signs are at. We would do our best to approximate the existing buildings on Commerce Drive and give you several different angles to see how it's all going to fit together.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything from Danny or Kevin Ritter?
No, I'm in favor. Danny.
No, Mayor, I'm okay with it. I think
Kevin?
it'll give us
Okay.
some good data for later on.
All right. If there's no more questions, someone want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. We authorize the mayor to accept the proposal from BHC Roads in the amount of $4,700.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Lane.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Item D, consider bids for power supply for downtown events.
Yes, Council, seems like a long time ago, but you'll remember the success of DeSoto Days Festival being held uptown. DeSoto Days Committee, I think, decided before that festival was over that that's where they wanted to be moving forward, and that hasn't changed. They're planning the festival to be uptown again this year and indefinitely. One of the big challenges to making that event happen last year was power. The DeSoto Days Committee had to rent an industrial-sized generator. The rent on that was somewhere around $3,000, $3,500, and then they had to fill it with diesel fuel for 3 days. So it's an estimate, but I think they spent close to $3,500 or $100 or $4,000 just to get power for that event last year. So that, coupled with the idea that eventually we might move one or all of the summer concerts uptown, and even independent of the summer concerts, have some events that might need power uptown, we started looking at ways to get a permanent power supply there for those temporary events. And so Jay worked with some contractors there and Evergy to decide how best to do that. We did narrow in that the power need is certainly for the festival. The power need was at the intersection of 83rd and Shawnee, most of it. Now, the Carnival has their own. They always have had their own generator, so they'll operate independently. But this is where we set the vendors up, and this is also where the bands played. And as we were thinking about concerts of our own, this would be the logical place for the band. Or actually, Kevin Ritter, I think, reminded me or told me that the bands used to set up in the bank parking lot as sort of an elevated stage and play toward the south, toward 83rd Street. So again, this would be a good spot for that. So the solution we came up with requires some boring work along the alley that's just north of 83rd and then southward along Shawnee Street. So we'll have to have a contractor to bore those lines in there. We'll also have to purchase a cabinet, and this I've got in the staff report where the cabinet's going to be. This picture here shows the rough location, general size, a very rough idea of the size, and then this is kind of what the cabinet's going to look like. Pretty similar to the ones we have down in Riverfest. This is bigger than those ones down there, but it's the same concept. It's locked most of the time, and during an event we'll unlock it, and the power supply will be in there. So in total, between buying the cabinet and installing the conduit, Westar is going to pull the insulators, the conductors through the conduit for us, In total, it's going to be just under $12,000, and the city crew will have to pour the concrete pad. Would be the only other cost involved. So I think it's an idea worth pursuing. We don't have it specified in the budget for this year, but we can take that $12,000 out of contingency funding. If you want to move forward, we have 2 bids for the boring work and 2 bids for the materials for the cabinet and the associated materials. So if you want to move forward, I'd recommend accepting the low bids for both, and I've got those motions written in the staff report.
And my question,
Yes,
how many cabinets are there that we're talking about?
just one. Just one.
Just one.
Yep.
Is the sectionalizer above ground or in ground?
Yeah, it's above ground.
How big is it?
Oh,
They're like
there's one
2
out
by
the window,
4, so they're
somewhere around that. They're about 16 inches tall and
yeah.
2 by 4.
They're kind of them green, light green.
Mhm.
Well, most of them.
There's one right out back, and you might be able to
Coffin
see
look-
it from the window.
yeah.
But yeah, it'll be you'll see it for sure.
'Cause that's
Yeah.
basically going in somebody's front yard, almost.
Yeah, I mean on the corner by the alley. Yeah. Let me see if I had this. I can pull this up.
Street view.
I mean, they're in a lot. I've seen them in other people's front yards. I mean,
It'll be somewhere in here by this power pole.
okay.
Yeah.
Actually, it'd be more up the street, wouldn't it? Is that the
Yeah,
bank
no,
part?
that's
that's
the
the bank?
alley / bank.
Yeah. So here's the bank parking lot,
Okay.
and the the cabinet will be actually somewhere in here.
Can the sectionalizer be located in the bank's green space instead of the? Yeah, I mean, I realize it's right of way, but rather than putting it on the homeowner side of that driveway,
Because that's that little tiny. No.
that's a tiny little house.
Yeah, that's a tiny,
Yeah.
tiny.
it's a tiny house.
I don't see why not. I mean, it's put there on the map because it's a straight line
Yeah.
down the alley.
I mean, with where it is there, the trees, I'm a little bit less concerned about it.
Because the power is going to be coming down this alley.
Right.
Yeah, if you want to, if you'd like it somewhere other than where we've got it shown, I can't imagine it would be a problem unless it's some problem with the bore has to be a straight line. But we're only talking about a 3-inch conduit, so I think they could probably bend it to have it set over here if that's your desire.
Yeah, I think the length is a governing factor. I don't
Yeah.
think it's alignment. I think it's the distance out to that.
Yeah, and that wouldn't change that.
Question on the pedestal, the cabinet itself. Are we treating that the same way, or how would we treat a utility company that we're going to put a comparably sized cabinet in the right of way relative to screening or setback?
That's the thing. If the power company wanted to upgrade service somewhere, they'd put a sectionalizer there, and we wouldn't have.
Well, what about I'm talking about this.
This is a little bit bigger.
This is the one I'm talking about. How would we treat that?
There's transformers all over that are as big as this, and they don't even ask us about them.
Okay, so we don't have any screening requirements or
No,
anything
not really.
relative to.
No.
Okay, I just want to be sure we're treating ourselves.
We're not
consistent.
giving ourselves a
Yeah.
sweetheart deal.
Yeah.
And eliminating landscaping
Right.
requirements and other.
Well, we did think about that because initially we were thinking about some sort of a rack with a meter and some other stuff that wouldn't be very aesthetically pleasing. We were thinking about some landscaping, but this, I mean, it looks a lot like all the other stuff.
Yeah.
That's in the
Looks like a street light controller.
Yeah, it's very similar to a street light, traffic signal controller.
I mean, we could.
They would get a right-of-way permit, though, correct? Or-
Yeah,
The
they would.
contractor would have.
Yeah, they would. If
But there
it's
wouldn't be
actually
any
doing the work.
screening requirements or anything like that.
No.
And the other question I had was relative to that corner. I presume if there were a need for power at 83rd and Wea, that we could pull it off of the fire station.
Over on the
At the other
side.
end of.
Oh yeah, at the other
Downtown.
end.
Yeah, the block away.
You know,
You answered my question. I wasn't completely sure as to why you picked it there, but I was thinking if we needed power there, because that can be another place where you can set up in a parking area. Do we have power availability at that intersection?
Yeah, I'm sure we have some. I don't know how much. This is we've got 400 amps that will go to this cabinet. So it's a substantial supply.
Okay.
I don't know what the feed is to the fire station. If we need a lot of power, I'm sure we could run up 120 volts to do.
But in the
stuff.
event, if we decided that intersection was one that needed power, at least there's public property there.
Yeah.
Maybe it could be provisioned from.
Yeah, I couldn't swear to the capacity there. Though.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea.
I know it's enough to put a really bright LED light on the top of that.
Yeah. There's we in our business we worked with some other communities and their park or recreational activities and power provision in the right of way is one, and that so I think it's applicable here for promoting downtown events.
Yeah.
It'll be on the city's power bill though, right?
Yeah, it'll be our meter. Yeah.
That's all I got.
Okay. Rob, any questions? Lori?
No.
Kevin Ritter, questions?
No, sir, I'm good. Thank you.
Danny?
None.
Okay. Well, so I guess the question is whether or not we want to spend the money now and go forward. It's 3 years worth of power, it sounds like, for the festival, but it would open up other opportunities downtown. So, someone want to make a motion, or we want to ponder it?
I'll make a motion to approve the proposal to install an electrical cabinet at 83rd and Shawnee and the associated construction and material acquisition costs associated with it, which would include a bid from Sosia and Sons for Sosoya and Sons for $4,300, and approving a bid from Border States Electric in the amount of $7,675.66.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Lane,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Daniels,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Hunamichael.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. Item E, 2021 budget discussion.
Yes, Council. If you notice, I think we put a budget out early in February, and we're at least a month behind, probably 6 weeks behind now because of the COVID-related impacts that we're seeing. It is the budget has become top of mind for other county city managers in the area and the county, and if you're kind of keeping up with what the county's been doing, they presented some potential impacts to the Board of County Commission a couple of weeks ago about sales tax. The primary concern is sales tax receipts for 2020 is the current focus countywide, and county staff presented the Board of County Commission with scenarios that range from a 10% reduction in overall county sales tax to a 30% reduction in sales tax, and they've asked their department heads to adjust come up with suggestions on how to adjust their budgets accordingly and still meet minimum levels of service. So they've been going through a bit of that exercise as well. At the same time, the county managers group's been meeting weekly on teleconferencing about how each city is handling this. They range from Overland Park, who relies very heavily on sales tax revenues, and they also have the convention center that is now shuttered and not making them any money and only costing them money. So they have significant impacts they're looking at. Other cities, don't have a whole lot of retail in them, and maybe they got 3 grocery stores and nothing else, so they're looking a little better. I think DeSoto's somewhere in the middle. And I've included there's a spreadsheet on the staff report that talks about what the other jurisdictions were thinking, at least as of last Thursday, kind of what they were projecting. Nobody's really, expressing how they're handling the 2021 budget. Everybody's budget cycle's the same, so everyone should be starting at least their 2021 budget. Doesn't seem like anybody's really even trying to worry about that right now. They're trying to put out the immediate fire of what's going to happen this year. And so everybody's going through this exercise of, okay, department heads, how are we going to handle this? What if I had to reduce your budget by 10, 20%? They're looking at layoffs, they're doing wage freezes, they're doing furloughs, things like that. Nobody's paying much attention yet to what happens beyond. And we're doing the same thing. You know, I've asked our department heads to see what it would take, and to reduce their overall expenditures by 10%, without any layoffs, and without any staff reductions. Another assumption I'm making is the merit and cost of living increases for 2020 would go on as planned. So we're kind of holding those frozen and seeing how we might fare throughout the rest of this year, assuming a 20% reduction in our sales tax revenue. So for us, our sales tax represents about 55% of the revenues in the general fund. Water and sewer funds are more or less insulated from any sales tax calamity that we may have this year. The just based on our water readings for March, or our current for the first quarter, doesn't look like demand on the water or sewer side is going down. Our factories, Merck's still operating, Engineered Air is still operating. Huhtamaki has reduced, but they're still in operations. As long as that continues, I think our utility funds will be pretty well insulated from the negative, at least in the short term, at least this year. Moving forward is a whole other scenario. As you know, we're in a very good cash position in the general fund, $2.35 million we started this year with. That represents about 55% of our operating revenue. That our monetary policies recommend a operating reserve of 30%. So even before any of this, our long range projections had expenditures exceeding revenues, so that we could moderate that level down, stair step it down. So we had this curve that went down smoothly. And because of that, I'm not overly concerned with this year. The concern is year 5. So we kind of budget now and set expectations for that year 5. And we've all heard about flattening the curve on the virus. We need to flatten the curve in the future because if you just take these impacts and project them forward under a couple different scenarios, if we don't change our expenditures expectations, the curve gets ugly pretty quickly. So what I tried to do is in the modeling, so now moving on from 21, but then going out to 24, I modeled 3 different revenue scenarios, and they all assume that for 2020 we're going to have a 30% reduction in sales tax. I'm sorry, 20% reductions in sales tax. And we'll have a 1/3 reduction in the recreation fees because we've already canceled basketball. We are likely to be impacted with softball and baseball. And at the next council meeting on May 6th, we're going to talk about we need to make a decision on the pool season. Manhattan, Kansas has already announced that they're closing their pools for the year. We'll be at the point where we need to make decisions on we're going to fill this thing up with water or not. So assuming a third reduction in recreation revenue. So the modeling, the 3 scenarios that I tried to present were the worst case of kind of modeled after the 2008 recession, where we have the massive reductions this year, but then an additional reduction in 2021 and 2022 before things sort of level out and then start to claw back steadily. The scenarios 2 and 3 are less impactful than that moving long term. So we have 3 projection scenarios, and for each, or 3 revenue scenarios. For each expenditure scenario, for each one of those, I tried to come up with expenditure scenarios that would essentially level the curve out or try to level the curve out by the end of the 5-year period. such that by the end of the 5 years, we are still in the range of 30% operating revenues. Now, there's so much crystal balling to be done there. I didn't want to go too deep into that, but we do need to set some expectation starting point for our 2021 budget discussions. That's really the whole point of this discussion tonight is, we have started crunching some of those numbers and moving through some scenarios there, but I want to be able to set some expectations, have some recommendations on that too. So just looking at the staff report then, all scenarios, like I said, assume a 20% reduction in sales tax for 2020, 33% reduction in parks and revenues fees for 2020. The other thing that all these model scenarios is that we're assuming that we're not reducing any expenditures for 2020. We're assuming that all the budgeted expenditures are still going to happen. We're still going to do everything this year just like we were planning on doing. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep some powder dry. Some stuff, as we go through this, we'll know more by June than we do now how this is impacting us. So, but kind of for a most conservative case, I'm saying the 2020 expenditures, we're not touching those yet. The fourth thing is our road maintenance program, $450,000, a pretty big chunk of the general fund. That keeps going through all the 5-year projections regardless. We're not going to be able to do anything about health insurance increases, so we're still projecting 5% increases to that year over year. And the sheriff's contracts are largely independent. They're not really in the general fund anyway, but those are going to probably continue to increase as we go through anyway. So the next table here talks about the scenarios, and these are revenue scenarios. So the number one, like I talked about, in terms of sales tax for 2021, in addition to the 20% reduction we're looking at this year, I'm assuming an additional 8% reduction next year, and then for 2023, a 3% reduction, and then it levels out. So property tax, similarly, although 2021 property tax, those assessed valuations are already set. And so in the model, I'm assuming a 3.5% increase in our, assuming that what's already been assessed will be collected next year. So you see a 3.5% increase for next year. Our assessed, by the way, our assessed valuation, we got the appraiser's report, and it's closer to 7.5. But this assumes that we're going to adjust the mill levy back down in accordance with the tax lid, so that we can only capture inflation plus our new growth. That's going to be about 3.5% for next year. After that, it levels to 0 for 2022 and 23 before it starts climbing back up in 2024. That's the first scenario. That's the worst case scenario. Scenario 2 is a little bit less, so an additional reduction of 3% sales tax for next year before leveling off. Property tax begins to climb in 2022. And then scenario 3 would be what I'm calling the best case scenario, is that after the 20% reduction in sales tax this year, it levels off next year and it starts to climb back up. So with those three, I tried to look at the expenditure scenarios, and they have A through F. And on the model runs, they show, and I'll just scroll down to one of them. So scenario A, or scenario 1A, has expenditure scenario, or revenue scenario 1, expenditure scenario A. All of the A's assume no reductions in the expenditures. So we're going to spend money like we thought we were going to, and obviously none of the A's are going to work. B's are a little more aggressive. So if you look at all the scenario B's, we're holding our expenditures flat for the next 2 years. And then they start climbing back up. Every scenario C assumes a 10% reduction next year, then it's flat. And you can see, so these curves, the green, I think I showed this last time. The green bars here are what we assumed before all this bad stuff happened, and the red is what this model shows. So with each scenario, it gets a little less worse. So you can see the red, we bottom out at 2024. Here, we still have some money in 2025. Scenario D, in each one of these assumes 10% reduction this year, further 10% reductions next year. And so you can see that gets a little better. And then E's a little more aggressive. So scenario one. So each one of these scenarios has different projected revenue assumptions. In each one, you'll see the personnel. I'm sorry, I'm choking up here. I'm really
It is. It's bothering me, man.
passionate about this, guys. Each one of the scenarios tries not to. Well, in none of these am I assuming any layoffs, any furloughs, this a couple of them assume a wage freeze next year, but then even after that, it's a 1.5% increase. So in terms of personnel, that's what we're doing. Personnel is a big part of the budget, and I think at least in terms of this model, it's a last resort. Layoffs are last resort, but they would be a fix. You know, if we get 2 years from now, and even the worst case scenario is not the worst case. That's still an option. It would be my goal not to have to go there. So that's why I'm trying to think 5 years ahead. Mm-hmm. Not to belabor each one of those, not that I haven't belabored it already, but in the end, what it looks like based on those model results, I would recommend that we go into the 2021 budgets with the assumption that we're going to make 5% reductions in commodities and contractual expenditures in the general fund, below what they are this year. And so that's the direction I've told the department heads to sort of head. I think that allows us to be reasonably conservative with this year and next year without being overly conservative. If we need to get more aggressive, we'll know later this year if we need to get more aggressive. And if we budget money, doesn't mean we have to spend it. That's why this doesn't even look at what we're going to do this year. So we have some flexibility this year to do some things. As we get into the fall, if it looks like we need to do some things, we'll do them. But I think a 5% reduction makes sense to set the expectation for 2021. The bottom of page 3 has got a chart of some big ticket items that we could kind of target if we need. For 2021, if you look at what we're going to need to do to reduce by 5%, looks like we're going to have to find about $250,000 in the general fund that we've got budgeted next year that we won't budget, or that we've got budgeted this year that we won't be able to budget next year. So some of the big ticket targets are this $450,000 road maintenance thing. I mean, we could reduce it by $100,000. The street also, I didn't fill in for whatever reason. I forgot to fill this column in. The street department asphalt budget this year is $85,000. Reducing that by $20,000. Building maintenance again, I don't remember how much that was, but we could reduce. These are bigger ticket stuff. The building maintenance fund, in the community center, summer concerts, unfortunately. The last line there is the payments to the electric reserve. So we know we have this vehicle equipment replacement program that we borrow from the electric reserve and we pay ourselves back. We could delay those payments for a year or two. The thing about that is that unless we decide we're just not paying ourselves back, which we could do, we'll just have to pay those in the end anyway. So in the term of the long-term projection, that doesn't do us a whole lot of good. I think you could also argue that skimping on street maintenance won't do us a whole lot of good either, because we're going to spend that money in the future anyway. Essentially, every dollar here is a reduction in level of service that we provide. And so, hard budget times mean those hard decisions. But this is kind of a list of what those sorts of things might be. The other thing, I don't know why I didn't put it on here, is with this vehicle and equipment replacement schedule, we could just pause that by a year. We could just say, look, 2021, we're just going to make do with what we've got. Pausing that by a year would actually gain us that amount. So on a year-to-year basis, it's somewhere less than about $50,000 that we're probably looking at when you factor in the purchases and the paybacks and the leases. it's somewhere in that neighborhood. So that would be another thing we could extend those out. So I wanted to get that in front of you. I mean, I know it's a lot, but really in general, I just kind of wanted everybody to kind of see where my head was when we're telling department heads to look at your 2021 budget when I'm presenting that to you here next month. So I've got a revised budget schedule here. On the last page of the staff report, I'm targeting May 21st as the date that I provide you with that first draft of the budget, which is about a month. I think initially I was targeting this meeting actually for the initial budget presentation to you. Remember, we schedule our budget such that we can essentially approve it in draft form in early June. So if we needed a vote to increase the mill levy for whatever reason, we could still do that. This takes that out of play. We're not going to be able to do that with this schedule, but I don't think anybody's got any appetite to be raising mill levy right now anyway. So, so that's the new schedule. It'd be the May 21st, and then that gives us just plenty of time really to work through, modify those budgets, have workshops, and still hold the proper public hearings to get it certified to the county by the end of August. So that's it. Tomorrow I'm going to be you'll be receiving the usual budget reports for the end of the first quarter. Interestingly enough, our sales tax is up 10% from the first quarter last year, but it goes December, January, February were our receipts. So the March is not in there yet. We won't know March receipts. We don't get those until the end of this month. So we're still a couple weeks out from seeing what that impact might be on us. Looking at the Board of County Commissions had a presentation today from Siri about what industries are particularly vulnerable. Looking at that list, we don't have a lot of those here in DeSoto. We don't have a lot of restaurants or service industry sort of thing, tourism certainly. We do have a lot of industries that aren't particularly hard, like manufacturing and pharmaceuticals and things like that. So I'm hopeful that we're going to be okay. The biggest problem is the biggest chunk of our sales tax we get is our portion of the county-wide collection.
Right.
We know that's going to take a hit. So we'll know more in a couple weeks about that. That's all I have on that.
Any questions for Mike? Okay.
Yeah, I got a question if that's okay. What's the talk? What's the thoughts on any federal government stimulus subsidies that might come through that would support local government, be it through operating costs, payroll, an offset of sales tax revenue, or infrastructure stimulus that we may be able to take some budgeted items that we have and have funded through an alternative source and therefore shift money around? Whether it's league of municipalities, or what are you hearing from that talk?
Well, I think you probably hear as much as I do about a future stimulus.
Yeah.
They've been talking infrastructure for 6 or 8 years, and I think the common thought is that there will be an infrastructure stimulus come out of this, much like the ARA stuff in 2019. But you're in that industry. You probably know more than I would. In the CARES Act, there was provisions to help local governments, and they're struggling mightily with that because it only goes to the states, and then the states can funnel it. But they had a provision in there: only municipalities or counties of over half a million.
Yeah.
And in Kansas, that's only Sedgwick and Johnson counties.
Right.
And we know they're not just going to give them $500 million to do with. So we just don't know how that's going to. No one's really figured that part out yet. But is already something in the CARES Act. The other thing I heard about the CARES Act is that. There's also FEMA disaster funds available, because it's been declared an emergency. So there's an opportunity for some recovery, but really you can't be recovering lost sales tax.
They're expense related. They're
expense related.
If we had to hire, I don't know what,
We don't. I
If
look
we have
through that.
additional expenses because of this event, then we can recoup those, but we can't recoup lost
revenue.
income or lost revenue.
Yeah. So I've looked through what we've experienced, and we did pay some overtime there for a couple weeks. We might be able to recover some of that, but it wasn't a great amount.
Yeah, I was on a call with Casey Chamber Public Affairs guy yesterday, and he was. I mean, they were kind of laying out, round 3, 4, 5, and they're kind of expecting that something will be in a future package that will be for communities of a smaller population, because that almost. That it's some of the smaller communities that are getting dinged the bigger pro rata share on sales tax revenue. Fortunately, we're not. I think DeSoto's not in there, but if there is the one I'm paying attention to is when infrastructure comes around, that if we have some things that we were otherwise intending to spend money on, if we can capture that, then that money can be used elsewhere in the budget. But I'm sure you're keeping your ear to the ground with, obviously you're plugged into the other communities in the Johnson County area, because at this point, really everybody's flying in the dark a bit, and learn from how each other is adapting. Every city's different. Like you said, Overland Park is really wrestling with some issues, and every jurisdiction has their own constraint, but everybody can learn from how everybody's responding to.
It really has been a unifying kind of a thing.
Good.
To see those people every week,
Good.
almost daily sometimes, and everybody's just working through the same stuff. And the county's actually really stepped up and showed great leadership, really throughout in all aspects of the thing. So if little things like that are positive, I think we can build. It's something we can build on. But yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of in the same boat.
Good.
Okay, moving on then. We have no executive session, I'm assuming.
No executive session.
Okay.
That's correct.
We are ready for advisory reports. Mike?
Lots of stuff to report, but I put most of it in the email I sent out yesterday. Just kind of a brief status of operations around City Hall and around the city. So look through that. If you have any questions, let me know. You probably noticed you haven't gotten one of those periodic updates from me in a while. I'd like to replace that with there was a Google spreadsheet document in that email I sent. It's kind of a daily thing. What I'm trying to do is kind of keep track of who is, because we're on minimum staffing, so we have about a third of the employees on any given day are just home, just with pay, but home. A third are here, and then we do have a handful that we've actually furloughed. Well, there's only 5 that are currently technically on furlough right now. It's a bit of a mess, if you haven't heard, trying to get and qualify and get uninsured or unemployment insurance benefits through the Kansas Department of Labor right now. And so our hope was that with the additional $600 per week of uninsured or unemployment benefits from the federal government, employees making less than $27 an hour or make more on unemployment. So our hope was that those employees who were furloughed would be in that boat. No one in Kansas has seen their $600 yet. Word from the Department of Labor today is that that's going to start being available. That'll be available starting next week. And if so, then everybody will be made whole and there won't be any gaps. But if not, I might have to call some of those employees back off furlough so that they don't miss a paycheck, which was my intent all along. So it's kind of a mess there. We've been trying to help those employees get benefits. There's just no communication right now. And again, that's another thing. Everybody's in the same boat. So look through that email I sent yesterday if you have any questions about current operations. And one thing, to your point, Kevin, about moving forward with construction projects, we do have the request for qualifications for roundabout design. That was sent out early this month. The proposals are due on the 24th, so at the end of this month. And once we get them, typically what we do is I'll get a committee, myself, maybe Brad, a council member, maybe a planning commission member, to look through those qualification statements and narrow those down. to 2 or 3 maybe for follow-up interview, depending on how they look. If you're interested in serving on that committee, let me know. It doesn't have to be done. We've got another couple of weeks, but we won't have another council meeting before then. So, or I guess we could talk about it at the May 6th council meeting as well. So if you're interested in that, let me know. I do want at least one.
Well, I was planning on participating in that selection because it's a highly visible and political issue here in our community.
Yes, it is, and that was rolled into the request for qualifications, and I've had conversations with probably half a dozen engineering firms. What do you mean that public involvement? So you try to work them through, and I think everybody who's designed a roundabout is familiar with the aversion to them within certain segments of the population. So it'll be an interesting design. So it looks like we've got really good response to that RFQ. I think we're going to get 5 or 6 statements from engineering firms. So I'm looking forward to that. That's it. That's all I have in terms of reports.
Okay. Patrick.
Yes, just briefly wanted to share with the council, and Brad may want to chime in here too. As most of you know, Dean Weller is sort of liquidating what he has at his building. And he came to me several weeks ago. He currently has an auction scheduled for, I believe the date's May 15th, 16th. Right. And Dean would, on that day, and it's still kind of in flux, they may have to pull the plug on the auction.
Mm-hmm.
All of this is subject to, whatever orders are in place. But the May 6th meeting would be the only meeting we would have to present to you with a temporary use permit for this event to happen. Dean is requesting that on the day of the sale, that the alley behind his building as well as 83rd Street would be closed to vehicle traffic because he wants to display cars and merchandise in those areas. So that's something that will be coming to you if the auction is going to go forward. And just wanted to sort of throw that out to see if you guys had any things you wanted us to address as staff, or give us feedback that's there's no way you're going to entertain that type of thing. Just so Dean's very stressed out about all of this, his building, this auction, particularly with everything going on. So like I said, Brad's going to be working on a temporary use permit that we'll have before you at the next council meeting. But in the interim, if you have any feedback for us, that would be helpful.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Brad, anything?
Just have a couple of things. The UBass street bid is out, and that should be on the May 6th council meeting, and then Thursday. And then I just wanted to say also thanks for approving the visualization study. Planning Commission, when we talked about that post, I really struggled with how many was too many, and we wanted to get some sort of feel for how much, how impactful those real beneficial tool, not just for the next poll sign, but what after that.
Okay. Council comments. Lori, anything for the group tonight?
Well, follow up on that. I haven't even been on the highway, so I don't even know what that sign looks like that Burger King put up.
Been at home.
I haven't been. Well, I haven't been at home. I've been at work, but I have not gotten there via the highway.
The other side.
I just, but I mean, from the highway, I haven't seen it. So, Mayor, if you don't mind, I want to take a couple minutes and share with everyone. It's not really a city thing, but kind of related to the city. An endeavor that the DeSoto Food Pantry is taking on. So this time right now, we're getting a lot of people who really want to help the citizens of DeSoto. And with that being said, getting donations, I just went to the mailbox now and have another pile here. But the pantry itself is limited to giving food to people. And with the situation we're in now with the pandemic, we're not doing it where people come in and shop like normal. We're just doing pre-filled bags at the door, and it's very limited to what we're even giving out to people. So with that being recognized, there's a recognition that maybe we find another way to help the citizens of DeSoto in dealing with any kind of a crisis, with this being one of them that we're in right now for a lot of people. So what we decided to do as a food pantry is to open up a second fund, which we have named the One DeSoto Relief Fund. And this relief fund will help people beyond just giving them food by being able to, through a grant process, people would be able to apply for it, kind of identify their needs. Maybe it's a car payment, maybe it's a rent payment, maybe it is just food, but in a larger amount than one bag of groceries. And so what we've done is we've set up a separate banking account, we've set up a separate fund, and we are in the process right now of forming a second advisory committee that will oversee these funds and the distribution of these funds. So this is something that I think for right now will be able to help citizens who have lost jobs or waiting for that paycheck to come, that they have nowhere else to go. And the whole idea was to make it a better way for one organization to handle this than to have 2 churches or 3 churches trying to do their own thing and not knowing where other people have done it. One place for businesses, organizations to donate to. We've already got a lot of interest from the business community here in town, individuals that are wanting to help make donations to that. So this is up and going. We had a board meeting and passed the resolution. We've got a bank account already set up, and we're ready to move forward. I've got advisory nominees for an advisory committee, so this will be finished up in the next few days, where we'll get, hopefully next week, get it set up and get information probably on the DeSoto Kansas Food Pantry's website as far as how people can apply in the next weeks to months for this. And if you think about it, if you think about like what happened in Linwood when, a tornado goes through and everybody wants to help and everyone wants to give, this way this fund will be in place for anything in the future where there's a need for something like that. It's already set up where it can be easily put in place and easily distributed. So it's not our intent that this would stop after the COVID issues are back in normal, under control, but it may need to be a while before that's going to happen. And so it will be open with funds. As long as we continue to get funds in for it, we can give them back out to people. But even after that, there hopefully will be some funds in case there's, somebody in the community that has some situation that comes up that's, a big major change, house burns down, loss of something of that sort. So just wanted to share with all of you about that. I'll answer any questions if anybody has any questions on it. But basically, we kind of named it One DeSoto because it's one organization where we can all work together and make it happen for our citizens here in DeSoto.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Rob, only one thought and just toss it out. Do we have any mechanism for relief or support with water or utilities that we do offer? I know we've waived the late fees.
Right.
But for those that are in true hardship, do we have anything in place that we could do? I mean, I know Gardner just basically waived everybody's March electric bill, which I'm not saying we go that far by any means, because some people don't need the relief, and that was almost $800,000 that they just gave up. But for those that are in desperate need, do we have any, or is there a way to have any relief for those from the city side?
We don't have a program like that. for a time, Johnson County had a utility set-off program that they would pay, but the bill would still get paid. As you know, we've waived all late fees or connection fees, and we're not shutting anybody off. But aside from that, we don't have a program like that, like you're talking about. No, not that we couldn't. Like I said, I think I'd like to get another couple months of data in, but I think the utilities are going to be pretty well insulated from this. So there might be some capacity to think about doing something like that.
Okay. Kevin?
I didn't have anything to report, but I did want to do a follow up, and it's actually on Rob's question from last week about recycle collection. Was just curious if we had checked it all on, that in terms of relief effort. We talked last time. I made the comment that a cart, an extra cart is like $3.50 or something, super cheap. But I didn't know if we followed up on that at all, or if that would be one of the kinds of things that we could not bill for as an extra recycle cart. Was there any follow up there?
No, I'm sorry. I completely dropped the ball on that. I've not followed up with it. So I will. So the
I'm sure you've
thought
got nothing else to do.
I'll get that. So,
and I'd be curious, just from talking to our collection company. I mean, I presume they're seeing a lot more trash and probably recycle as well. If just looking around my own neighborhood is any indication.
I mean, at a certain point, if you only have a certain amount of cans, it's going to be stuff full. But
the question was, could we get recycling each week or twice as often as we're doing it now?
That was the resident's question, yes.
Okay, and then the follow-up is there some relief we could give on the trash service?
Or maybe
if it's not an extra collection,
an extra recycle or something.
Container, right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just, they have to hold it for the 2 weeks, but just an extra container.
Okay.
But I have noticed the same thing just driving around town. I think people are being at home, they're cooking at home, and there's just a lot more trash going out. And hopefully that's just transient, but just curious.
Okay.
Kevin Ritter.
Thank you, sir. I have nothing for tonight.
All right. Danny, anything for the group tonight?
Thank Lori for setting that up. That's a real great thing you're doing there, Lori. I think that's great. And also wanted to ask one question, Mike, on the 83rd Street maintenance thing down there on Kill Creek, are barriers, you got any new information on that?
Yeah, Brad reported that we've got the bids going out to replace the Jersey barriers. That'll be going out this week. Oh, it's already out? When are those due back? Okay. The second one in May. Okay. Does that answer your question, Danny?
Okay. And also, Mike, I wanted to thank you and also Marshall for the lighting of the tower. It looks great. Heard a lot of good comments about it. So wanted to say thank you to that. And that's all I had, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Danny.
Thanks,
Danny. I don't think I have anything to add. That light was a topic of some discussion.
I don't know if I've seen it.
You got to see
but
it.
I was thinking
Lights it up.
I had seen
I didn't get one, but
I had seen a picture of it, but I don't know if it was lit up when I saw it, but maybe it was, and I just didn't realize it. But I actually was wondering who had a good photo of that, because I thought it would be a great image to put with the One DeSoto Relief Fund.
Sure.
If somebody that knew how to do graphics and had a photo like that could do that for me, it would be really awesome.
Danny, you were thinking about getting some pictures. Did you get any?
I got some good pictures. I'll send them in, Mike.
All right.
Okay.
I'm limited in certain things, and that is one of them. Okay.
Camera, right?
But I will make a motion. We adjourn.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We're adjourned.
Over here. Yeah.
not over. I mean, over the last week.
Oh, well, yeah. When I was remote. Yeah.
I tell you what, that works pretty slick though.
Yeah, it does.
If it weren't for I wanted to hear the budget thing kind of firsthand.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Been at home.
I would have been. Yeah, this budget thing's going to be a roller coaster because
Yeah.
you don't know really what the economic response.
Yeah, I
is
just
gonna be.
I want to see the yeah right.
Oh, it's completely
Yeah.
flogged and cracked and.
So it's
I can make myself believe everything's going to be fine this time next year. Well, everybody will forget about it, and then I can make myself believe it's going to be 10 years of misery. I mean, and everything in between.
I'm somewhere in between
depends on
though.
how you take stats and facts, it can be pointing either way.
Yeah.
Walking by your house a whole lot more. Walk by your house a lot more.